Time for another Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures for Aussie Home Loans. And they deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital. They do Zoom as well. And their areas of expertise include first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, and personal loans. Today's guest is an all-time Olympic great, four-time Olympian when it comes to marathons. It's hard to run one, let alone run four. And he's run more than that throughout his career. He's also got a great success rate when it comes to Commonwealth Games as well, having won a gold medal and multiple medals in 3 other Commonwealth Games as well, and third in a World Championships. He's been a terrific server when it comes to administration, especially at Commonwealth Games. He is one of the greats. It's Steve Moneghetti. Steve, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us.
No worries. Thanks for that lovely intro, Dan. Nice to be along. An Olympic year, always a special year, and gets me up and about a bit more as well, which is exciting.
So when you think about Olympic Games, what do you think about? Do you still think about competitive juices flowing through your body, or do you just think about the fact that a new batch of athletes get an opportunity to do what you do?
Very much so. I mean, I get lots of people talking to me about, memories like we'll do today. But for me, it's more about the present. And, I'm on the board of Athletics Australia. So we've got a direct interest in what happens over there in this new batch of athletes who are just on fire. I've got to say, I think it's probably, we're in the strongest position athletics has ever been in this country, certainly in my lifetime. And it's just exciting to see all that unfold. And, we're a couple of weeks away from opening ceremony, but obviously then the warm-ups over in athletics really starts. The real Olympics start on the 1st of August. So great for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's 75 competitors in the athletics team. How many medals do you reckon they could win? Or is it all about personal best at this stage?
Yes, I just think they're preparing well. We've seen them all through Europe, absolutely blitzing some of the Diamond League, some of the major competitions over there. So I'm excited, but we never talk medals because I know how hard they are to win. There is the rest of the world, and the rest of the world in sport, but particularly in athletics, is just advancing quickly. We're seeing, I wake up every day and there's a world record for something on the track or in the field or on the road. So it's just exciting to be a part of all of that. But that means that the competition is going to be absolutely red hot in Paris. We had a great result at the World Championships in Budapest last year. So, I think to reflect that, or if we could match that, that would be an outstanding result.
You are on the board of Athletics Australia, and obviously you would expect me, knowing me pretty well, that I would ask this question. Is the selection policy right? Could it be better?
Yeah, obviously we had some controversy with the women's marathon and Lisa Waitman and Jess Trengove and Jess Stenson. And, I signed off on, we all signed off, the board signed off on the selection criteria. And if you read it, you get a different perspective on it. If you read it, you can say, well, it should be the first three. And the first three technically in the women's event won the quota spot for our country, but then it's up to the selectors then to pick, because we had 6, people out there may not be aware, but we had 6 women qualify, which is unheard of. So obviously 6 into 3 doesn't go. And so the selectors chose to pick a team that they thought would be most competitive in Paris. And obviously as board directors, we sign off on that. And, one of my roles is on the high performance section or representative on the board. So we sign off on it. We don't select the team, but I own it. So I take responsibility for that. And, obviously, I've had little interaction with Lisa, but she's not happy with me. And I can see why. She'd be very disappointed. She's missed out on going to what would have been a record 5th Olympic Games. But it's not my decision. I didn't select the team, but I endorse it.
Have you reached out, Steve? Do you plan to reach out, or do you think she just needs time?
Oh, I received a message. We've had a little message. I couldn't while the selection and appeal process was on. So, but we've had a little interaction since, and that's not for me to put out publicly. But that's been it's been a difficult process. Obviously, her and Lockie are friends of mine. And it's always difficult now. It's put a a wedge in the friendship. There's no doubt about that. But, I don't know, you take these roles on, and like when I was a chef de mission, it's not a popularity contest. You do what you think's right by the organisation, and that then is going to disappoint some people. And, we need to celebrate the people who are in the team. And whilst I can talk about Lisa and the disappointment for her not being selected, we can also celebrate those who are selected and get to go to Paris. That's what we're here for, to talk about the Olympic Games and the future of our sport, and it's in good hands.
Did you take into account that Jess had made a great comeback 6.5 months after the birth of her second child? You thought, well, that was an outstanding performance. It had probably exceeded expectations.
To be perfectly honest, Dan, I have not actually considered the twos and fros. I'm kind of a person who I delegate responsibility, and whilst I say I endorse a team and I own it, I left the selection completely to the selection committee. I did not interfere. I haven't spoken to them. I had no interaction with them. Basically, I think you know me well enough, and the people around me and people who would know me, I've always had a really good support crew around me. And once I get them on side as a support team, I give them responsibility and I trust them implicitly. And that's how it's worked in my life. So, I gave that or delegated that task. We at the board delegated that task to the selectors, and I let them have the autonomy that they should have as selectors. And whether I agree or disagree is irrelevant, because it's not my decision.
I saw it firsthand in regard to your ability to delegate at the 2018 Commonwealth Games as chef de mission. Steve Moneghetti has joined me, my guest today on Dashing Down's Olympic Adventures podcast for Aussie Home Loans. One more on this. In regard to the marathon, is there any way in the future that you could have a marathon where all those that are in contention to represent Australia in the marathon at the Olympics could run together? And the best 3 times, if it's only 3 competitors for each country, the best 3 times are those that get in. Is there any way that'll happen in the future?
Don't worry, that'll be the conversation moving forward. I think, Dan, interestingly, and the public, it's probably just to make the public aware, we've never had such depth in athletics. So normally we're actually trying to get people in the team. We're saying, gosh, I hope this person runs well and they run the qualifying time that we've set, because we've struggled to get teams big enough and strong representation. But I don't know what's happened in the last couple of years, but we are just seeing athletes progress at a rapid rate, getting under qualifying times, and put the selectors in a difficult position because we've got to leave people out of the team. So one conversation that we'll be having moving forward is, do we have trials? And the controversial factor with the marathons is, different marathons around the world, a lot of our competitors or the people who are up for selection don't compete against each other regularly. And I only ran one marathon on Australian soil, and that was the Olympics in Sydney in 2000. So out of my 22 marathons, they're all spread around the world at Commonwealth Games, World Champs, London Marathon, Berlin, Tokyo, Beijing, Boston, all around the world. So they're different environments. So one way to certainly satisfy that dilemma would be to have a marathon trial, or to have just trials. Generally, we could have, we sort of have that now, where if you go to the national athletics competition, if you're qualified and you win the nationals, you get selected. So that sort of process. Whereas in America and in some countries around the world, they just have trials. First 3 finishes, that's it. If someone falls over or gets caught up in a race, like we saw at the American trials, and they fall, then they're not considered. End of story. And it's black and white. Now, that is black and white, makes the selector's job very easy, but yes, I'm not convinced you get the best team. Now, we may decide, we might have a marathon trial. We may have just 2 positions. So we might have 2 positions and leave 1 spot open, because I always want, I want to recognise that marathons, you're only running 1 or 2 a year. And if you have a bad one or a good one, then it can really affect the outcome of your selection. So I think we need to have it a little bit open-ended. So that will certainly be a conversation we'll have moving forward. It's a terrific position to be in, because we're having athletics just booming at the moment. But, publicly, we come out of it with some controversial outcomes. And, I'm not on the Christmas card list of a few people, but at the end of the day, you have to make some hard decisions and people are not going to be happy.
You're very pragmatic about that. You're pragmatic about everything, Steve. Has that always been the way you've always conducted yourself, even with your running? Pragmatic, just pretty laid back. You give the persona on the outside that you're a very relaxed man. As I said, it was an honour for me to be part of your team as a media representative at the 2018 Commonwealth Games. There are no doubt issues going on behind the scenes, which I didn't know about, but every time I saw you, always nice and friendly to everyone. Is that the way you always ran, or were there times where inwardly you were paddling feverishly?
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of issues going on. That's where you do have good counsel around you, and ultimately then you make the right decision, because what do I say? I really I search broadly to make sure I'm completely across the issues, and then I make a value judgment and I own that judgment. And it's difficult. I like being popular, and as a chef de mission, you're not always popular because you have to, that's why you're there. If the decisions come to the chef, then they're not easily solvable at a lower level. So you have to make what's going to be an unpopular decision. And I'm not sleeping as well at night because of what's happened with the marathon selection dilemma. I can assure you of that. But what can you do? Someone had to make that decision, and I caught the brunt of that. I'm hoping that people know that I've been involved in athletics for a very long time, and I want to do the best thing by the athletics fraternity. I didn't choose to have the controversy as it was. I'd love to have, all 6 in the team, and they deserve to be going, but they can't. So people are going to be unhappy. And unfortunately, because I'm on the board, I get, some criticism for that. And that doesn't make me happy. But when you're in positions that you have to make decisions, then obviously sometimes you're not going to be popular. So you got to take it like that, Dan. The good with the bad. It's not always good upside, and you're trying to make a difference in life. I'm a person who tries to make the community a better place for me being in it. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Depends who you talk.
Yeah, correct. The great Steve Moneghetti has joined me, 4-time Olympian. Dashing Down's Olympic Adventures is our podcast, and we're here for Aussie Home Loans to deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital city, and they do Zoom as well, as Steve and I do, and as I do with most of my guests on this podcast. Now, you spoke before about depth. I've just had a chat with Ebony Lane, who'll be running the 4x100 metres relay, which is fantastic achievement by her. Why is the depth so good, Steve?
Gee, well, that is a great question. And, I think we've probably, I think we're just in a good era with technology, with social, coming off COVID. But I think even before COVID, there was just a movement, this mass participation, this socializing, and hopefully we've got a good structure in our sport, and that's being recognised by the participation rates, but also then really good coaching and just having systems around to encourage our athletes to be the best versions of themselves. So you've got to give credit to the organisation. I mean, I've only been on the board a couple of years. I can't take credit for what's happened, because it's a number of things that have been put into place behind the scenes to hopefully make an environment where the athletes can thrive. And that's what we're seeing. I think there's, there's more public, I don't know if it's respect or understanding of the work that athletes are putting in, and the support for that has become a bit more positive. So I reckon that's kept athletes in the sport more and for longer. They've got more social awareness through social media. So they've probably become a lot more supported. So there's a good environment for them to be the best versions of themselves. And we've seen that that depth really improve across our sport in, especially and I'm not going to pick on one specific area, but females, our women are just absolutely dominating. Most of our success has come through our female athletes, which has just been outstanding. And, we're seeing a growth both at in recreational running, but just in the sport in general from females across the board, which has been just outstanding to see.
Now, Sinead Driver's 47 years old, and she's running an Olympic Games marathon. Why do you think I mean, you retired at 38 from running Olympic Games. I reckon you could have kept going. Looking at you now, I reckon you can still keep going, Steve. I tried to run with you at the 2018 Commonwealth Games just for a general run, and sorry, Dan, you're too slow. And within 5 metres, I've lost you. Didn't know where you were, so you could keep going. She 47. It's an unbelievable performance, isn't it?
And that's again where I think we've extended people's careers. And, Sinead didn't start competitive running till she was 33. So she's sort of had that 15-year window of opportunity, and she hopefully for another few years yet. So I think we're seeing people stay in the sport longer because of the support. I think all three of our female marathon runners are all got families and jobs and life. So, but they've been able to continue to stay in our sport, hopefully because the system has allowed them to thrive within our structure, no matter what your age. And that's how it should be. And isn't that great to see? And, I probably had a long career, and I think I was at the end of my competitive running days when I retired, but I retired not because I wasn't supported, but because I'd achieved everything that I thought I could achieve, and my body was starting to tell me that. So isn't it great that people stay in the sport and they retire or they stop of their own volition, not because someone taps them on the shoulder or because they've got to get a full-time job or their family things or there's issues external to their sport. And that's what has happened certainly in the Australian environment. And that's not just within our marathon runners, but across the board. And isn't that how it should be? You know what? Why should we should be welcoming people to be involved in sport at any stage of their lives and for as long as they possibly can. I have a passion for running. I still run every day if my calf settles down and allows me to, because I love what I do, and it not does it define me. I like to do it and I want to do it, and I'm a better person for it. So the benefits of sport are untested, both at the elite level and at any level that you do it at.
How many Ks a day would you run now, Steve?
Well, I was running about 70K a week, so about 10 a day. But as I say, I've had a bit of a calf issue the last couple of months. It's just sat me on my bum. But I'm on the walk-run program, which can be a bit awkward. People see me out running or walking and they kind of go, what's going on? But it's not by choice. So hopefully I'm transitioning back to getting going a bit. I'm slowing down, but, I still love to get out and get those competitive juices going. Once a competitive animal, always a competitive animal, I think. So it's nice to be able to still apply my trade at the level that I am. It's, it's obviously not at a high level, but it's still personally satisfying for me, Dan.
Now, Steve, I'll ask you the important question about your career first. 22 marathons, lots of training. Do you reckon you could tell me how many pairs of runners you went through? More specifically, you could probably tell me how many pairs of runners you might have gone through in the lead up to a marathon. And did you have one for training and one for running specifically for an event?
I alternated a lot, Dan, and I was fortunate enough to have a great sponsor who's, without telling you who they are, they're on there, and they're still, I've been with them for 30 years, so they're an unbelievable friend. I'm part of the family there, and so rotating my shoes was really valuable. But I always had a heavier pair of training shoes that I'd do for my long run. Then I'd have a lighter pair that I'd wear sort of midweek, and then I'd carry. People always used to tell the story that they'd see me running around with this other pair of shoes, and they'd go, oh, why are you carrying this other pair of shoes? And I'd tell them, well, I run that far, I wear out one, I've got to carry another pair to save them. But that's not true. They were a lighter pair. So I'd warm up in a heavier pair, I'd stop, I'd change into these lighter pair for my quicker sessions, and then I'd change out of them back into my heavier shoes, because the heavier shoes have got more support. So they're protecting your legs a bit better. But I always liked them when I got in a session or in a race to have light shoes where I could run fast and feel fast, but they probably did a little bit more damage to my legs. So you didn't want to be in them all the time. And this is the big transition now, Dan, with the super shoes you're seeing now. They've got so much sponginess and support. People aren't getting as fatigued in a race, in a marathon, but also they're not getting as tired, and they can continue to train. So it's not smashing their legs up quite as much as it did in my day. So they're probably, their legs are getting a bit more protected than I had. And I used to alternate shoes just so I didn't get a wear pattern, so I didn't get favor one side of my body or get an issue with one part of my leg. So that rotation, I think, is really important, and I would encourage people to do that so that they're changing the load areas on their body and on their legs, and run on soft surfaces. The other thing I say is, I run on gravel, dirt in the forest around Ballarat, sometimes on the bitumen, and as little as possible on the concrete. In fact, I was on the Gold Coast on the weekend for the marathon up there, and if people saw me out walking, they would have noticed, not on the bike path, on the concrete bike path up there, but on the little grass bit at the edge. And I kept getting, I could see people were annoyed with me because they were walking their dogs, and they were walking on the concrete and their dog was on the grass, and I'd be kind of running into their dog or into their dog lead because that's where I wanted to run. So I try to get off and look after my body as much as I can.
The great Steve Moneghetti has joined me for Dashing Dan's Olympic Adventures podcast. For Aussie Home Loans, they've got over 25 lenders on their panel. 4-time Olympian, 3 times he finished top 10 in the marathon. Why long distance running, Stephen? You started, of course, with the 10,000 metres, and then in 1986 you also ran the marathon, your first ever marathon. Did you decide at the last minute, I'm going to run the marathon, or in the lead up, that was something you always wanted to do?
It was always something ultimately I was going to do. And, I love my cross country, and I grew up as a cross country runner, and, I finished my cross country results are the best of my career, but people don't sort of know those and don't sort of focus on those. It's not an Olympic event, but that's where I applied my trade best. But obviously then I'd run the 5K on the track. I didn't like running on the track all that much. And I only ever had 2 coaches. Tony Benson coached me here in Ballarat, and then I changed in 1983 to Chris Wardlaw, and he still coaches me to this day. He doesn't coach me, but he's my mentor and lifelong friend. And he wanted to get me faster. He said, look, you're going to go out on the roads, but you need to be quicker. So let's get back on the track and make you as quick as you can. And fortunately, that allowed me to qualify for the 10K at the Commonwealth Games in 86. And I just got in that team. And then he, in his wisdom, and this is a true story, he rang me up about 3 months out from the event and said, just like we're talking about, there's only 3 spots in a marathon team allowed. So in the men's marathon at the Com Games, we only had 2, and there's a spare spot. And he said, what about I talk to Athletics Australia and see if we can get you in the marathon? It's after the 10K. Yeah, so you'll have done that, and then you can just have a bit of a practice run in there and see how you go. And I said, sounds all right. Do you think I'll be okay? And he said, yeah. And we spoke to Athletics Australia, and wisely they let me in and won a bronze medal, and the rest is history. So it wasn't meant to work out that well, but it did. And I was obviously born to run long distance, and I seemed to just have a natural affinity that I could run longer. The longer it was, I didn't need to slow down. And, I tell people now, Dan, I didn't actually ever get any better and beat people. Just as the distances got longer, they couldn't keep going, and I passed them and I finished ahead of them. And that's kind of how it worked.
Do you think it worked out well in that first race in Edinburgh in 86 because you didn't have enough time to think about it? You just went out there and ran?
Well, I was pretty comfortable. I was in 10K shape, so I was fantastic shape for the first 10K. And even the next 10, I was still traveling pretty well because, I was starting to get a little bit tired, but I'd been doing, I'd run sort of, back in those days, it was 18 miles, which is about 30K. And Chris said just add a couple of miles on. So I'd been doing some 32K runs. So I didn't have any trouble sort of 25, 30K, but my God, I got really tired when I got out of my comfort zone at about 35K. But by then I was sort of in the medal position. Deke was up the road, and I was running with a Canadian guy, and we were in silver medal position, and kind of thought, well, this is going pretty well. I just have to hang on for another, half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour, and I'm going to win a medal. So that mental just stimulation of suddenly thinking, wow, I could win a medal here. What's going on? And we caught sort of the guy who was in second, so that we were sort of pretty clearly in second or third. So I just kept running along and didn't get tired, and went into the stadium and finished in third place. So it just kind of happened. I know I'm just sort of a bit blasé about it, but that's exactly how it panned out, to be honest. And, then obviously that set up my career and defined me. I always tell everybody I got on the plane and left Ballarat as this unknown 10K runner and came home, a marathon runner that was the heir apparent to the great Rob de Castella.
How did you handle that? I would have thought with your usual aplomb, Steve.
I was pretty happy. Yeah, I was pretty excited because I'd always sort of. It's funny, Dan. What happened was and without sort of sort of going on about it, but I sort of told everybody that if I didn't have a good race somewhere in a cross country race or some international race, I kind of always had the excuse that, well, it doesn't kind of matter. At the end of the day, I'm going to be a marathon runner. So I was always saying I'm going to be a marathon runner. I'm going to be a marathon runner. I remember on that day in the call room in the stadium, Meadowbank Stadium in downtown Edinburgh, I remember thinking, God, no more excuses. I hope this event actually goes okay because I've been telling everyone that, this is the event for me. Here I am about to find out. I hope it ends well, which it did. And, I got vindicated, but you would never have known. Anything could have happened. It could have been a disaster, and I could have then battled to get my name out there as a marathon runner, might have to come back to the track, and ended up just sort of being and also ran and made up a few teams, but never really had the success over that really long distance that I'd expected. But obviously I did, and it was fast tracked. And Chris Wardler, you don't understand. And sometimes the background to these podcasts, Dan, you get to hear the real stories, and the real story is his wisdom of ringing up 3 months before and saying, what about we get you in the marathon team? I would have never, ever considered it. So, sometimes people don't realize that it's these little opportunities and situations that arise that just open doors for you. And it was a sliding doors moment for me. I could have said, no, I don't want to run that. And I said, well, do you think I'll be okay? And he said, yeah, I reckon it'd be good for you to jump in. And I trusted him implicitly. And in the race, the outcome was fantastic and set up the career and the reason I'm on here today, obviously.
And for other reasons too, Steve, give yourself some credit. You're one of the all-time greats. But as you said, Chris obviously played a big role in that. Just on Chris, is he undervalued a bit? I mean, in 1980, he also played a big part in helping push for Australia to go to the Olympic Games from an athletics or athletes point of view. Does he get enough credit for the great coach he is and the great mentor he is when it comes to athletics and especially long-distance running?
I don't think he does, because he's got unbelievable wisdom, history. He loves athletics. He's the most passionate person I know about athletics. Been to every World Championships, Olympics the last 20 years. He went to 2 Olympics himself. He's head coach of our Olympic team for Sydney 2000, and he's just the reason I'm on the board is because he and Lord stepped down, and he was keen to have that continued sort of distance presence, and he asked me if I or encouraged me to apply, and it went through the process, and here we are. So just his presence and his influence on athletics has been undeniable. And there's any person that you would attribute, and that 1980s story is a great one, and we should acknowledge that continual representation that we've had was because of people like Chris, and his enthusiasm is infectious and his passion is undeniable.
Now, in 1988 was your first Olympic Games. You went to Seoul. What were your expectations, and did you exceed them with a much bigger field, a much stronger field, more countries? You finished 5th, Steve. Your best performance in your 4 Olympic Games in your first Olympic Games.
Yeah, and the best performance by male. Deke was 5th in 84, and only surpassed by, not only, but Lisa's silver medal from 88 also. I think it was 88, where she won a silver medal. So, apart from, I'm not going to pump up my own tyres, but the highest placing, so we're the equal second highest placing of Australians ever at Olympic marathons with that 5th. It doesn't sound good when you say 5th at the Olympic marathon is the highlight of your career, but that's as high as we've got in the men's side of the marathon. So they're not easy to get in the top 10. And that was a little bit of a surprise, probably. I had sort of that bronze medal from the Commonwealth Games, but obviously the depth's not there. But then I went to the World Championships the next year, and I was 4th at the World Champs. And so that set me up pretty well. So I thought I was confident I could run top 10, and I just wondered how the race would pan out. I was concerned about a couple of the Africans, probably underestimated Jalindo Bourdin. And I probably think, on that particular day, if I let the pack go, well, they ran away and I got a bit tired. I think at 30 or 35K, I can't actually remember, might have been 30K. And then I worked my way back through the field. I got back to sort of 10th or 11th and then ran through to finish 5th. And I think I probably didn't realise, had I gritted my teeth a bit earlier, I might have finished a bit higher up. But to be perfectly honest, I wasn't going to win a medal. Fourth was about 200 meters in front of me around the track, Nakayama, the Japanese guy. So to be honest, I'm not sure it would have made much of a difference had I hung on, and probably still would have got a little bit tired and finished fifth. So really proud of that result, because at your first Olympics to have such a prominent performance is a good outcome.
This is Steve Moneghetti with us on Dashing Gans Olympic Adventures podcast for Aussie Home Loans. Their areas of expertise include purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out, construction pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans and personal loans. And they've got over 25 lenders on their panel. Another medal in 1990 in Auckland, and then off to Barcelona in 1992, where things didn't quite go to plan, unfortunately. You finished in the top 50, but no doubt you would have been a bit disappointed.
Oh, it was a disaster, but yet I'm proud of finishing. You know, it was probably the one marathon I could have pulled out over my career. It was the only bad one I had, really. And yet I'm proud that, you know, when you pull on the Australian singlet at the Olympics, you do the best you can. And the best I could on that particular day was 48th. You know, we probably made a few mistakes that in the lead up, I take responsibility for those. I wanted to stay just out of Barcelona, and we're there about 3 weeks before, and I didn't want any air conditioning. I wanted to acclimatise by toughing it out and, you know, running in the heat, running in a full tracksuit, laying awake at night, you know, in a lather of sweat, thinking, how good's this? I'm really acclimatizing. But all I was doing was getting really badly depleted and dehydrated. And then I did, back in those days, we did what's called this carbohydrate depletion as well as load. A lot of people will load up now before a marathon, but we did a depletion phase, and that sort of lessens your carbohydrate stores in your body, which hopefully your body increases its own natural glycogen, and then you top it up in the latter part of the week and you have a super supply of glycogen. But I think what happened for us, my body closed down and said, we're going to die. We're not going to produce any carbohydrate or glycogen. We're just going to go into survival mode. And I started that race quite thin and very depleted, got halfway through, hit the wall and battled on up Montjuic to the top of the hill and the stadium. And as you say, finished in 48th place, which was, I still ran 2:23. I mean, it's not too bad. When you look at that and think it's the slowest run in my career, and you tell someone now I ran 2:23 and it was an absolute disaster, and yet, you know, you look at 2:23, it's pretty respectable across the world marathon world for an also ran. But for me, it was a disappointing result. And to be honest, Dan, I kind of thought, I was a bit at the crossroads, thought that's probably the medal I should have won. I didn't. Do I retire? Do I chuck it in? Do I now have to get a real job? Are all my sponsors going to sort of not have faith in me? Are the public going to ditch me? Am I done? So I kind of came home in a bit of a reflective mood, and that's kind of what happens when you have a disappointing Olympics. And, you know, there's a lot of success and a lot of people who are getting accolades. I wasn't one of them, and I had to sort of come home with my tail between my legs and just reassess where I was and whether I was going to continue devoting my life to this dream of winning an Olympic medal.
Did you know in the lead up to the marathon, a day or two out, that you were in trouble, or it was only when you were running that you just didn't have any energy to really make an assault in the second half of the race?
No, I thought I was in great shape. You know, I was light. I was ready to go. I was in the best shape of my life. And I tell people, and if you look at my results, 1992 was the best year of my running life, but just not, I didn't run well at the Olympics, but that's for people, you know, you're defined by that. So I was in great shape. I'd broken the world record for the half, ran a 10K personal best not long before, broken the Lapa Lake record that still stands. And I was just in great shape. But, and I was on the start line thinking, yeah, this is my medal waiting. And then I was kind of started and I just didn't feel great, which often happens early on. And I'm waiting to sort of get going and for my energy levels to kick in. And I got to halfway and I felt really flat. And there was about 40 of us in the lead pack. We're just jogging and they surged a bit at the front and I just could not respond to that surge. And I suddenly thought, oh, gee, what's going on here? I'm not sure I am going to run out of this. And I just went into survival mode then and realized I'd hit the wall and I could just need to get all my personal, forget about medals, forget about the lead pack and just start thinking about getting this little body across the next 20K at, you know, just over 3-minute Ks in, or as quick as I could to get it done and dusted without doing too much damage.
Were you proud of yourself that you finished the race knowing that your body had gone into free fall?
Absolutely. And I was really frustrated in the race and disappointed. And, you probably, people won't know, but Tanya, my wife, and Chris Wardler are on the course, and they suggested I should stop and pull out. And I wasn't going to be doing that. So, I'm proud. And it was a hilly finish. We kind of went up Montjuic and finished up on a high area. So it was a pretty tough last 7K. But I'm really proud that I would be struggling to come on and do this podcast with you, mate, if I hadn't finished, because I'd know we'd be talking about it, and I'd be embarrassed that at the Olympic Games I didn't finish the event that I was selected for. And yet I've done that. And whilst it was 48th place, I know that on that day, that was the best I possibly could do. And I think what it did do, when obviously we'll talk about another couple of Olympics and the rest of my career, when you mentioned the gold medal at Com Games and bronze medal at the World Championships in 97, I learned a lot, and I enjoyed those victories or those successes so much more because of the disappointment of Barcelona. That's a fact. And that's a personal thing for me that I have to deal with and have to deal with. And I'm really proud that I ran a very disappointing race. It was the best I could do, but publicly it was seen to be a disappointment. And for me to be able to turn that around and then go to international competitions and have the success that I did is a testament to my character and my resilience. And I'll tell you that on here proudly, that is, it tested my character, and I didn't show weakness. I decided to, learn from it, get back out there, work hard, and the results were as a result of learning that lesson and the work ethic that I had following that disappointment.
So it made you a better person and a better runner, you reckon?
Absolutely. And I'd never had a bad marathon. So when I'm coaching, when I am talking, when I am in situations where I'm talking to marathon runners or I'm talking to athletes in the village, I'm coming from a far better position of strength, having been through adversity myself. If it was all just, all happy days and great races and I just won medals, hit left, right, and center and had great success, then someone comes to me and goes, I had a really disappointing result. Can I talk to you about it? And I go, well, I'm probably not the person to talk to because I never had a bad result. Everything was happy days and I don't really know what you're going through. So go and see somebody else. But having been through it myself and come out the other side, I think a better person. I'm absolutely more educated to be able to deal with that and to pass on some advice to other people.
How long after Barcelona did you decide you wanted to keep going? And did you have a break after it?
Yeah, we came home. We had a holiday on the Greek islands on the way home and had a couple of weeks off and didn't do a lot of running. But once I got back to Ballarat, interestingly, I was surprised. I probably felt like I'd let the country down. And I'm thinking, wow, everywhere I go for the next, 12 months, people are going to be not able to talk to me or ripping into me and saying, you disappointed me, you let the country down, blah, blah, blah. People were really good, Dan. They just said, it happens. We know you haven't let us down. We felt for you because we knew all the work you'd done. We knew what shape you're in. So don't feel like you've let us down. We're feeling bad for you. So I think that support that I got in just being honest, and everyone knows me as a person who I wouldn't do anything to disappoint my country. So I think having that reinforced got me back on the horse pretty quickly. And I think Chris Wardler and I spoke about maybe getting my confidence back by doing some other events. So just put the marathons on the back burner a little bit and try and get into some cross-country races and maybe some road races, half marathons, and shorter stuff on the road, just to change it up a little bit, because I'd become so defined by the marathon that it kind of overcame me a bit, and I forgot about all these other distance races and distance events that I could enjoy along the way. And one thing, Dan, I reckon if, you could probably mount an argument for Deep being the better marathon runner, greatest marathon runner Australia's ever had, and with Lisa Ondieki, and then you could probably say Craig Mottram's the best sort of 5K runner we've ever had. But I reckon here I am pumping up my own tires again. If you said who's the best distance runner we've ever had, I reckon across the board. I broke world records for the half marathon. I'm the highest placed male at the World Cross Country, fourth. And then I had success on the road, and on the track at Commonwealth Games, bronze medal. So across the board, I'm probably a really strong distance runner. And I reckon that having the disappointment in Barcelona allowed me to get back and run in some of those other events that I was absolutely very good at. And it just reinforced that, you know, whilst I had one disappointing result, it wasn't going to define me, because I had all these other performances where people were saying, actually, you had a bad run at Barcelona, but gee, you ran really well in this race last week. Or so, you know, I think that was really helpful to have a bit of a slight pivot and to just focus on some other events where I had great success. And that just then built my confidence up leading into Com Games in 94 and then off the Olympics again 4 years later.
As you said, you won a gold medal, and Steve Moneghetti's with me for Dashing Down's Olympic Adventures podcast for Aussie Home Loans, four-time Olympian, and he also was a multiple medalist in 4 Commonwealth Games, including gold medal at Victoria in 1994. Great experience for you, Steve. You must have loved that.
Oh, yeah. And that was, you know, just obviously I'd won Berlin Marathon and Tokyo, but I'd never really won a championship. And I reckon I was the best runner in that race. It's always nice when it pans out, you know, you think you're the best runner in the race and you end up, you know, getting the gold medal. And I'm really proud of that run. And I ran, you know, I ran 64 minutes for the back half of that race. So I absolutely blew the field apart and came home really strongly. And for me, there was also, you know, it was really satisfying because the silver medal went to a guy called Sean Quilty, who's sadly no longer with us, but became, you know, he's always a close friend of mine. And it was highlight of his life, and it should be, because he had an unbelievable run. So to be able to share that with him as well, and, you know, it was just a great time and a really good team to be a part of. And for me, kind of removed a bit of the monkey off my back, and I'd come out of Barcelona. So the gold medal in Victoria in 94 was kind of, well, if I don't ever do anything else, I reckon, you know, I can hang that one up and say, well, I've achieved something.
Did it give you confidence for Atlanta that you could maybe go top 10 again?
Yeah, because I'd ran so fast in that back. I don't reckon anyone in the world would have beaten me in that Commonwealth Games race. I just ran unbelievably well. So that really allowed me to build then to the next Olympics. And, you know, I often tell the story, you know, not many people get to go to more than one Olympics, but for me, you know, I'd been to 2 and I'd had one really good result and one really bad result. So unfortunately for me, Atlanta was kind of, you know, that seesaw, you know, am I going to be remembered as a person who was a pretty good runner, but he always disappointed at major champion, you know, couldn't get the Olympics right. So, you know, it was a bit of expectation and pressure. And I can tell you, Atlanta probably, and I mentioned this the other day to someone, I think the toughest marathon I certainly ran, and maybe one of the toughest marathon events ever. The course was really hilly, very hot and humid in Atlanta, and the most challenging race, marathon race of my life, I reckon. Although Seville in 99 was pretty tough too, but I think the course and the humidity in Atlanta could not be underestimated. And, you know, you mentioned, I think, you know, I finished 7th. I wasn't sure myself, but the only reason I remember I finished in Atlanta is because I was closing down on 6th. And whilst you get a medal for the first 3 placings, you get a certificate, an Olympic certificate, if you finish top 6. So 4th, 5th, and 6th is worth something. And I was really keen to get that certificate, having got it in Seoul. And I was running down, I think it was Rolando Vera, from South America, and I was catching him at a rapid race. The only time I wished a marathon to go a bit longer, Dan, because in about another 100 metres, I was going to have him and nab that 6th place, which would have been, I think, you know, a nice personal result. 7th was still pretty good. I'll take it, but I was really close to 6th and just probably didn't quite get there in the end.
Is it horses for courses training, Steve? So you knew that Atlanta was going to be a hilly course. You did a lot more hills than you would normally do in the leader.
Yeah, and a lot more heat acclimatizing. I'm not sure how long we've got, but rather than go to Sant Cugat just out of Barcelona and be sweating up overnight, I learned a lot about heat training, and I think I actually worked out the formula for me. I've told people, I'm not sure if people listen or don't listen, whether they do it now, but I actually used the heat chamber at Ballarat University. So I didn't go to a hot weather place. What I did was I trained in a heat chamber, and then I recovered in the natural environment of Ballarat, we might say. It was freezing bloody cold, invigorating, as we're only allowed to say here. So I was sweating it up, and then I'd come out of the heat chamber and just get on with life. And I think the thing with heat acclimatizing is exercise in the environment, recover out of it. So if I had my life over again, I would have done that before Barcelona. What I would have done at Barcelona is I would have trained in the heat, but I would have stayed in an air-conditioned environment and kept hydrate so that I recovered in a cooler climate. So that's kind of my story now. Any words of advice for heat acclimatizing, that's what I would do. So I did that before Atlanta. We went to Atlanta 12 months before. We came off the Gothenburg World Championships in 1995 and flew to Atlanta so that I would understand what the conditions were like when I got there 12 months later. And we got off the plane at Atlanta in 1995. Dan, it was unbelievably hot. It was horrendous. Oh my God, I thought we were going to die. And I remember Tanya was with me, and a couple of other marathon guys, Troopy, I think was there, and a few other guys. And we looked at each other and said, oh my God, we cannot run a marathon in this. This is just going to be just horrendous. And so I prepared us. So we had 12 months then to get ready for. So when we came back to Atlanta, we knew what the climate was going to be like. And it was hot, humid, and hilly. The three H's. And I think at the end of the day, I think, I managed all of those pretty well. And seventh wasn't a medal, but it was still a pretty good run.
The hottest marathon that you've run in, conditions-wise, Steve?
No, Seville was. I remember the story from Seville. No, that was a World Championships. We're driving out on the bus out to the stadium to watch the athletes because the marathon was on a few days later. And we drive down, and in the middle of the road, they had clocks. And, it was sort of 2:00 in the afternoon. And then for 10 seconds, it'd have the time. And then for 10 seconds, it'd turn to the temperature. And it was like 45 degrees. Oh. And anyway, a few other countries, they lobbied to get the organisers to turn the clocks off because it was just doing their head in. Every time we're going out to the track, you see the temperature at 45 degrees and you think, oh, yeah, this is going to be fun. We're going to run a marathon in 3 days' time. Not likely. So they turned the clocks off. That's how hot it was in Seville. And that was probably the hottest environment. It wasn't as humid as Atlanta. And, Chris Wardlaw will tell you that, sometimes it's a humid heat that can be difficult because you don't evaporate. So when you're out running, if you've got direct sunlight, you sweat and the sweat evaporates and you sweat again. Whereas if it's humid and you don't have that radiant heat, then the heat stays inside. And it's like you're going to explode from the inside out because you're not sweating enough to kind of release it and evaporate it and get more of that heat out. So your heating mechanism doesn't work as well in humid weather. And that's exactly what we had in Atlanta.
In the lead up, Steve, to an Olympic marathon, when is your heaviest block of training and when do you start tapering?
6 weeks out, we used to do a 3-hour run. Yep. Time, and I probably covered about the marathon distance. I don't want to downplay people who run a 3-hour marathon, but that was probably my Sunday training run, and that would be the longest run I would do. And I'd often go out and do a second run that afternoon. So you can imagine, I probably clocked about 40 plus K in the morning, another 7 or 8 that night. So I would have been up to sort of 50 K. And that's the only day I got anywhere near the marathon distance. And that was 6 weeks out. And then I'd probably have about a month out was when I was starting to cut my mileage back. So, I was running 180, 200 Ks a week, and then I'd start cutting back. And from a month, I'd probably have maybe my final race was a month out or 3 weeks out, and then I'd freshen up for that. And then that was starting to, then I'd go sort of 3/4 weeks. So instead of 200, I'd do 150, sort of 3 weeks out, and then I'd go to 120 2 weeks out and 100 the week before. So I'd halve my mileage the week before. So ours was quite a long freshen up phase, but you've got to understand, I've been training and running 12 months at doing high mileage. So for me to freshen up about a month out just made sure that I had an opportunity for my body to absorb the training and also freshen up and adapt and be able to get ready for what was to come.
How often did you worry about your body breaking down, or you knew your body back to front and you knew what you were doing?
Absolutely never. And every day I finish a run, and I haven't got a niggle, it's a happy day. But back then, I never, I had Pete Howley, my physio, who travelled with me and treated me, and I saw him a couple of times a week, and he was fantastic. And he orchestrated getting me to go and see him because my body was showing signs early on of having a few niggles. But once I started seeing him, his preventative treatment was just outstanding, and I never considered an injury. I mean, I had some injuries, but they were just a bit of an anomaly, and I'd go and see Pete and have a couple of days off or a couple of days treatment, and before you knew it, I was back out running again, and I just sort of modified my training rather than had to stop. And they were little blips on the horizon, and the rest of the time it was uninterrupted training. And there is no doubt that is part of the success that I had, being able to be biomechanically pretty sound and uninjured, so I could just keep building this platform of training over weeks, days, weeks, months, years, that built this super strength that meant I could get through a marathon at the pace and at the level that I was running them at.
Australian marathon superstar Steve Moneghetti has joined me, dashing Dan's Olympic adventures for Aussie Home Loans, and they deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital. They do Zoom as well, which Steve and I are doing. So you go to Kuala Lumpur in 1998, you get another medal in the Commonwealth Games there. Did you think that would be your last Commonwealth Games? And then obviously you were keen to get to Sydney for home Olympics, weren't you?
I was, yeah. And I think, I chose to run the 10K at Kuala Lumpur because I'd got my full set of marathon medals. So I think I was changing it up. So I needed, something to just make me excited about continuing to train at the level that I was training. So Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur, I wanted to go, but I think, having another goal of running the 10K on the track was really terrific. And I think Troopy had moved to Ballarat, and we did some really good track training. So it actually just freshened me up a bit. Or not, what did it spark me up? Didn't freshen me up, just gave me a sort of a new lease on life. And then obviously I knew that Sydney was coming up. They'd announced it in 1993. So I'd had this lovely 7-year lead up to think, well, I'm going to be 38 years of age. God, if I get to my 4th Olympics, then that'd be a fantastic achievement. It'd be, a lovely place to retire. And it all played out as it should have. It was almost, I didn't quite win a medal, but I ran pretty bloody well and had a great day. And it was almost the perfect place to retire and environment to retire in.
You finished 10th. Do you think, you said earlier you get a certificate for finishing top 6, which I think is great. Do you think, though, because marathons are so hard to win, that if you finish top 10, it's like winning an Olympic medal for a marathon?
I was on that day for me because, I'd been around so long, and you think back to 86 and having had sort of 15 years of a world-class career. And, all of my, I don't want to overplay it again, but, all of my marathons were major events because my first one was the Commonwealth Games, so I had 4 Olympic marathons, 3 Commonwealth Games marathons. Then I had, I think I had 4 or 5 Londons, a couple of Tokyos, Berlin, Boston, Beijing. They're all big events. So I didn't have any marathons that were just sort of little itty bitty marathons that no one cared about. So I think for me to actually be able to have a career for that period of time at such a high level was amazing. And for me to be able to then, to close the book on my international career by running my first marathon on Australian soil at a home Olympics in front of home crowd. And, I also tell the story of, on the balcony, we're about to start. It was 4:10 on Sunday afternoon. All the other events had finished, and there was we were on the start line just out in front of North Sydney Oval on Miller Street, and there were people yelling our names, Troopy, Rowdy for Rod de Hayden and Mona for me, and I'd never had this before. And then gun goes, and 42K almost, and we had the bit in the sort of Olympic Boulevard and in the stadium where there wasn't spectators, but for the rest of the road, people were yelling out my name. It was unbelievable. I'm thinking, how good's this? What have I been missing for 15 years? And have that home support, and then to sort of burst out onto the stadium and have 120,000 people cheer and have my family there. Oh my God, it was just, and for me, I ran through the fields. I came into 10th place, and I reckon that's about where I was at the time. 10th in the world at 38, having had the long career I had. I reckon that was pretty fair result and as good as I could have expected. And then to be able to do that in front of a home crowd and cross that finish line, knowing job done, was just the perfect storm.
You had some difficulties during the race. It didn't look like you were going to finish top 10 until you got going in the back end, Steve.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Maybe a couple of dietary things, and someone sort of did this coffee thing where I didn't have coffee for a few days, and And that's meant to sort of delay the release of your glycogen. And then I hoofed a couple of coffees down at the village before we went out to the start. And maybe I had too much coffee then, and it kind of delayed my glycogen because I couldn't get going early. And then, gee, once we went over Anzac Bridge and through the back end of the race, I was just feeling fantastic. And I was just storming home. And again, if the marathon had kept going a few K longer, I might have got up a bit higher, but at the end of the day, it's 42.2K and my result was 10th. And I sit here and talk to you really proud of that result, and to have, ultimately have that 3 top 10 positions in 4 marathons was as good as it gets. And I couldn't really look back on my career and think, I could have had better results, but I think the overall consistency and the longevity of my career is something that I'm really proud of.
You never thought of 2004? You knew that was it? It was all over?
My body wasn't coping with the training, and I think that's what you got to think about. And we're on the Olympic Adventure podcast with you, Dan, because it's a lead up to the Olympics. But it's not when you should be paying attention to athletes. It's the 6 months, 12 months, 10 years beforehand, and it's all the training that they put in to allow themselves to be called Olympians and to represent your country in Olympic Games. And in all of that preparation, I'd had some outstanding blocks of training over 15 years. And I knew leading into Sydney, I just got there. My body was starting to really notice the training. So I didn't have any issues racing. And, I retired, but I still won a national cross country. I went to the world cross country. I did won some road races around the world. So I was still obviously able to race at a really high level, but my training was definitely being compromised. And I knew I could really sort of squeeze the last bit out of this aching body, or I could just retire, give it a little bit of a rest, and probably have the longevity that I have, Dan, because I'm still running every day, because to some degree I've looked after my body rather than absolutely burying it by trying to get to that next Olympics. And that's what Athens in 2004 would have done.
Mars bar a day keeps the doctor away. It's the rumour I've heard with Steve Moneghetti. Always a Mars bar a day. Is that right, Steve?
Love my chocolate and coffee, the two things that define me in life, as people know me. And what a great, what a match made in heaven. Mars, a company, have their Australasian headquarters here in Ballarat, and it was just a terrific relationship. And again, it's just those friendships, relationships, and experiences you have, and that's what we talk about today. We focus a lot on results and outcomes, but it's the friendships along the journey and the experiences that I love talking about. And I've been blessed to be able to refresh my memory when we do chats like this, Dan.
Now, talking of relationships, one person has been with you right throughout it. She's been a saint, no doubt, and she's been there in every race you're involved in, is your wife, Tanya. What does she mean to you, and what was it like having her support throughout every single race that you're involved in, Steve, as, of course, you were growing a family too, 4 children, 3 daughters and a son?
Exactly. And undivided support. And it's incredible. I used to think I was focused and, doing everything I could, and everything was sort of falling into place. But I was actually unbelievably selfish. And that's what you have to be the top of your game in any pursuit in life. You have to be selfish. And that compromised Tanya's lifestyle, her her own career, and all of those other facets. So I'm incredibly indebted to her, just able to allow me to do what I needed to do to be not only the best athlete, one of the best marathon runners in the world, but also a public figure, and the draws on your time that takes. So, I was compromising. I didn't miss birthdays. I missed my first Father's Day, I can tell you that. I was on a plane tripping home from overseas. So missed my first Father's Day. So these compromises that I made along the way, that Tanya's had to absorb her whole life to be the rock behind the public figure and allow me to have the career I had. And I can't thank her enough. And you've given me a chance to do that on this podcast, Dan, because not many people recognize or realize it. And I hope she knows, but it's good to be able to recognize that publicly. And my kids as well, the only holidays we ever had was off to some running event. You know, we've come back, I said, from the Gold Coast. We had a couple of the kids up there with us, and, you know, I'm off doing my stuff. Well, hopefully they're enjoying being away, but it's not quite the holiday that normal families would have. That's for sure.
And Mona, make sure you tell people I'm a good bloke, that I'm giving you an opportunity to praise
Yeah,
people in your inner
absolutely.
sanctum. 2017, you ran the Berlin Marathon at the age of 55. Can I ask why?
Because Tanya, I won't tell you how old Tanya was, but she may have had a milestone birthday. So that's what happened, and we decided to go over. And Tanya's not, she won't mind me saying, she's not really from a running background. She worked at Sovereign Hill here in Ballarat and hadn't done a lot of running till we met. And she started doing some training with a group of friends, a group of girlfriends, and I think she's done two. I don't want to get this wrong. You would think I would know, but I think she's done uh, two marathons in her life, and I think one of them may have been Paris, when she might have had a milestone birthday, and the other one might have been Berlin, when she had another milestone birthday. So she's done two pretty good ones. She's like me. She's only had an international marathon career. She's doing it the right way as well. So that's why we were there and went back to Berlin in 2017 with Tanya and a couple of friends and her girlfriends, and had a great experience. And, you know, I didn't know this sort of happening. I organised to go over with a running group, Dave and Fran at Run Fun Travel, and we went over. And then Berlin, realising we were coming, Dave knows the organisers, and as it turns out, they started this Hall of Fame, the Berlin Marathon Hall of Fame, inducted two members. The first one was Uta Pippig, who won that race when I won in 1990. She won the female section, the women's division, and the other inductee was myself. So how honourable was that? And so if you go to Berlin and go and have a look at the Hall of Fame, you'll see Uta and myself there. And I think there's a couple of other people who've been inducted. I'm not sure if you know them, like Kipchoge and a couple of other
Oh,
people.
I know him a little bit, yeah.
I don't know why they bother putting them in, but apparently they've done some marathon stuff since me that might be worth being in the Hall of Fame. So things like that, Dan, come along in your life and you could never imagine would have happened. But it was great to go back and reminisce a little bit about what happened in 1990, back in those days when I could run.
Do you train, Tanya, or you don't have to?
I did, and she got injured, and so she sacked me as the coach, and she's sort of done her own thing. And she doesn't. I try to do a little bit of speed work, but she loves running with her girlfriends, and they chat and socialise. And, you know, the rec running's booming, and she's really loving that involvement. She's had a few knee issues, but she's hoping she still runs a couple of 2 or 3 times a week and enjoys being active, and has had her own personal successes in finishing those couple of marathons, which has been great.
And Steve, before I let you go, and Steve Moneghetti's joined me for Dashing Gowns Olympic Adventures podcast for Aussie Home Loans, heavily involved in the Commonwealth Games. You were the mayor of the village for 2006 in Melbourne. That must have been a great highlight. Chef de Mission 2010. As I said, I was very lucky to be part of the media team for the 2018 Games, of which you were our wonderful chef de mission on the Gold Coast in 2018. Are you worried about the future of the Commonwealth Games, considering the 2026 Games set down for regional Victoria have been cancelled?
Yeah, and obviously I was absolutely devastated when the games were cancelled from here. You know, we're going to have some events here in Ballarat, which was just a real terrific time or was going to be a terrific time for regional Victoria. And I'm on the board of Commonwealth Games Australia too, so we're certainly hoping that we find a host in 2026, and we're still fingers crossed that will happen, Dan, because we don't want to miss one. And, you know, what that might mean for the future of Commonwealth Games. But, you know, they are so important. You know, it's where I got my start. I snuck into that team in 86, and it set me up to have that career that I mentioned, 15 years of continual representation for Australia. So that would not have happened had it not been for Commonwealth Games. There are so many stories like that we need the Commonwealth Games to continue. And you think about multi-sport event, Brisbane 2032 Olympics will be fantastic. Well, one of the main lead-in events for that, the only other multi-sport event at this point in time, would be a Commonwealth Games in 2026 and 2030. So we need to have those lead-up events, and hopefully there is a city, state or a country that will take them on board. And we're hearing some positive signs, so let's wait and see. But they are so important for me. And, you know, I had that involvement 86 to 98 as an athlete. 2002 I was a an athlete liaison officer in Manchester, mayor in 2006, and then chef 10, 14 and 18, and then in Birmingham as a board member. So I've had that continual representation. I love Commonwealth Games. I bleed Commonwealth Games, and it'd be a tragedy if we don't see them continue well into the future, because they are such an important hold such an important place in world sport, but more importantly in the Australian sporting landscape too, Dan.
What did you like most about being chef de mission, Steve?
What I like most? Oh, gosh. There's a few things I didn't like. I think being able to have access to all the varied teams, so not just the athletics team, but the whole team, and being, invited to watch people train and to just be feeling so welcome, and then to lead a team that you're really proud of. And, we talk about Commonwealth Games, but really, Dan, and you've been there, you understand, the team is people. So we assembled 700 or whatever the whole team was. We got those 700 people to all get together, be on the same team, and contribute to make it the most successful team result ever. And it probably was in 2018. So for me to be able to be a part of that and to lead that group of people who could come together and be united to represent their country and do the best they possibly could for this thing that was Commonwealth Games, but most importantly was you representing your country, that is an outstanding thing. And if you think about the world, most of the stuff, what's on the news feeds right now, Dan, if you get off and have a look at the news feeds, it's doom and gloom across the world. And yet at that time, the Commonwealth Games, we had 10 to 12 days where we as a country were united under the Australian flag as the Australian Commonwealth Games team. And gee, it's hard to feel more pride than when you think of it in those terms.
And I need to say, before I let you go, I was talking to Jonathan Manasso on the day, and he, of course, was the head of the media team, and you and him were going out to welcome a few of the first teams coming in, I think the boxing team, the weightlifting team. And I said, be aware of the journos asking questions about Sandpaper Gate, remember? That had just broken in South Africa. The Australian cricket team in all sorts of trouble. Jonathan said, they won't ask about that. I said, be aware of it. And anyway, you did I didn't go out, but I watched you. You did a great job, because you had to flat that for 5 minutes, those questions. But that's what it's all about, and then turn it into something positive, which you did.
Yeah, and that's where, again, you being part of the team, and that's where you take the resources around you, the intel from the people around you. I couldn't be across, and I never would be. And my ability to hopefully have people like you feel an integral part of the team, that you contribute and you make me look good, but you also save my bacon in a situation like that.
Are you going to Paris, or are you going to be watching it from home?
I'll be watching from here. And I'm really hands-on. If I had a role and AOC wanted me to do so, or saw value in me doing something, or the athletics team did, I would, but I'm not a great spectator. So, we send the team away with best wishes, and, I know they'll do the best thing for the country, Dan, but most importantly, they'll have a life-changing experience, and they'll come home having been to 4. You're a different person for when you go to the Olympic Games and when you come home, and that's in a positive way. So I'll be just looking forward to seeing the smiles on their faces, the determination, and the way with which they carry themselves when they're representing their country, and watch it with interest back here.
Liam Adams' 3rd Olympic Games in the men's marathon. Patrick Tiernan's only young for, I would have thought, marathon running. Well, he's not yet 30. And, of course, Brett Robertson, who's had experience in middle distance running. How do you expect them to go?
Yeah, no, obviously it's a tough event, the men's marathon and women's marathon, as we've mentioned, but we've got the strongest teams we've ever sent. So that augurs well. And, not only at the marathon, but I'm really excited. Jess Hull, unbelievable last, with 5th fastest in history, and just, second outside the world. Anyway, there's so much happening in athletics. And then you look at, I love enjoying the sports that I don't really tune into or keep abreast of for a lot of other times. So we'll see those, Jess Fox and her sister, things like that are just great human stories that we'll see unfold. The athletics team's in a great place, and I hope they get to enjoy it, and I hope we don't find that we're putting too much pressure or expectation on them because they'll represent us well. But it's exciting times. And I love, you're thinking about a Jess Hull or our middle distance runners are probably in the best shape our middle distance has ever been. And I can tell you, Dan, a lot of those will move out to distance. So they'll become our marathon runners. And you're talking about Brisbane in 2032. Well, someone like a Cam Myers who will be on our next team just missed this one, or our young people you're talking about are on the teams now. They are the future of distance running as well, because they'll eventually go out in distance and they'll be the ones who may be representing us in Brisbane in 2032. So get on them now while they're progressing and developing. Enjoy their successes and follow their progress as they represent our country, not only in Paris, but in future teams.
Steve, it's been a great pleasure. You are one of the all-time greats. So I've got to know you a lot over the years. You've always been very, very good to me. Thank you for your time today. Steve Moneghetti, 4-time Olympian, 3 times top 10 in the marathon. He won 3 Commonwealth Games medals, a gold, a silver and a bronze in the marathon at the Commonwealth Games, and also won a bronze in the 10,000 metres at a Commonwealth Games as well. He's achieved everything, 3rd in a World Championship too. What a performance that was. And he's been with us today for Dashing Downs Olympic Adventures. For Aussie Home Loans, our areas of expertise include pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, and personal loans. And they've got over 25 lenders on their panel. Thanks so much, Steve, for being so candid, and enjoy the games.
Been a pleasure, Dan. Always love our chats, mate. So good to catch up. Look forward to catching up in person soon, and hope the listeners out there have got some enjoyment out of that and keep up the good work. Enjoy the games as we all will. Cheers, mate.